Nick and Kayley here tonight, and Charles Tarbey joining us for Property Fast Track, brought to you by Century 21. Great to be here. 13 12 83 is the number if you have a question for Charles on real estate, or email clickfeedback@talkinglifestyle.com.au. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you very much, Nick.
Good to have you here.
Hello, Kayley.
Welcome. Now tell us about this CoreLogic Home Value Index. What's it all about? It's about growth rates.
Well, there's a lot of interesting information around that, and part of it that I found most interesting is, again, something that we have been predicting, all three of us here, and that is that Melbourne tops the tree. So there you go, ahead of Sydney.
So when you look at this chart here, so total gross returns, Melbourne 19.3, ahead of Sydney on 15.8.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting year on year. That's a big number when you look at it overall. But the growth over the quarter has been strong too at 4.1%. I think that when I look closely at this report, it's not really telling us anything we couldn't see happening, because you know that eventually it all sort of filters out. It all sort of it has to start somewhere, and generally the Sydney market is where it will start. The only time I've seen a change in that is when there was a mining boom in Perth, and of course that took way off. Sorry, John, I keep bumping the microphone, waving my hands around too much. It's a salesperson's trait. I watched how that market went really crazy because of the mining boom, and almost caught up to Sydney. The median price at one time in Perth was almost the same as Sydney. So that's
Do you
the
think
only
it will
time.
come back?
It is coming back. I like Perth. I like Perth because when it corrected big time. And the correction is still occurring, only in a modest way now. If you look at the charts, I think it was a 0.03. Let me see. Yes, it was a 0.03 correction, negative drop for the quarter, which is actually really good for Perth because it was going backward at a lot larger rapid rate. And also the vacancy rates have been steady over there, and that's a good indication too. The vacancy rates are 8.03% in this last week. Last week they were 8.39. They've been up over 10. So I think there is a correction in Perth that has happened rapidly. I was there on Friday, actually, just for the day. Interesting, flying in and out of Perth in one day. But I met with a couple of the guys, and one guy in particular is having a really, really busy time. Really busy time.
That's good. And Canberra's going nutso too.
Well, again, you look at interest rates, you look at supply, and you look at jobs. And Canberra, well, interest rates are low, supply is good. They've got some great suburbs they're opening up. And, well, public service, so a lot of secure work there. So, and that's one we've been picking too. Canberra and Melbourne have been our two favourites for some time, and they're doing exceptionally well.
Charles Tarbey's here tonight. So this CoreLogic data came out today, a couple of days back, in fact. Now, it says here the slowdown in growth conditions is most evident across the hottest markets. So quarterly growth trend reducing from 5% in Sydney earlier in 2017 to 2.2% at the end of last month. Melbourne growth conditions slowing, although to a lesser extent. They peaked at 5.5% to drop to 4.2%. So it begs the question, is property appreciating at a lesser rate?
I find it really interesting that they talk in a negative way about a positive thing. So there's still growth. And that's the part that they're not really talking about. There is still growth in those capital cities, albeit that the growth rate has slowed down. There is still growth. And if we go back, Nick, when you and I spoke about this maybe even 10 or 11 weeks ago, they called the top of the market. You remember that article came out? That's it, top of the market. Clearance rates have gone silly, gone south. And, well, guess what? The clearance rates are back up there again at 74.5%. You've got in Melbourne, Sydney 71.1%. This time last week, the national clearance rate was 70.7. Well, it's up to 71.1. So what do you say?
Interesting too, this says the weakest performing capital city was Darwin, but the highest rental yields were Hobart and Darwin. So in terms of buying, it's not great, but renting it is.
Yeah, look, I think with the yield, that's a figure that it can be so easily misunderstood when you look at it, because the prices in Darwin dropped, so the yield is going to look better.
Yep.
And I think that the best way to look at it is the movement of rent. And Darwin has had an increase of 0.22%. in rent. I'm sorry, 0.77%. Brisbane had a negative 0.22 over this time last week, but Hobart, which was really interesting, had an increase of 1.1% this week over last week. So it's getting some rental increase as well in Hobart because the investors have moved in and they're buying up some good properties. So we've got to watch the figures and sort of make sure we get them in context. If you look at it overall, there's been an increase in prices for this time over the quarter for most capital cities. That's good news. The growth has been steady. That's even better news.
You can take a lot out of their snapshot here. Most affordable city, Hobart, median dwelling price of $338,000. Most expensive city is Sydney. We're at $856,000 as a medium dwelling price, and as you said before, the rental yields they can be quite misleading because we know that Sydney and Melbourne you pay a lot to get in. And so the yield from the rent is going to be less, right?
Yeah, you want a big yield? Pop out to some of the areas where investors aren't, and you may not get much capital gain.
Yeah. Charles Tarbey here tonight, Property Fast Track on 13 12 83, or you can email Charles if you like. Click feedback@talkinglifestyle.com.au. We'll have a chat to your Sky business partner, Tom Panos, later tonight. You're on together again, Charles?
We don't see each other. Ships in the night.
Are you?
Yeah. The Sky business is sort of renovating at the moment.
Yeah.
And so there are little desks everywhere, and occasionally last week I found myself at a desk with a filing cabinet and a camera on the filing cabinet. I had to stop a guy from walking past me while I was on air. He had a couple of pizza boxes that he was delivering, so it's very interesting at the moment. And I disappear out one door and Tom finds his way in through another door. So
all right, well you guys can connect on the radio later tonight.
We do our best.
Have a look at the auction rates and clearances and whatnot, and also we'll go around the grounds too. So if you've got property in Clarinda in Victoria or Wynnum in Queensland, we'll drill down to those two spots. And also, if you're thinking about finishing your property in a particular manner that's going to be appealing to a buyer, we'll have a look at why house styling is really important.
Now, a landlord bond, this is an interesting concept, Charles, isn't it? There's rental bonds that renters pay to protect the landlord against any damage they might do. Now, there's a proposal put forward for a landlord bond. What is it? And is it a good thing?
Look, young Sam handed me this information earlier as I walked in.
Yep.
And the first thing that came to mind for me was another layer of administration, another layer of administrative work.
Sure.
That we've got to try and keep, because look, when you look at it, most landlords, the majority of landlords are fine. They're fine. We don't have problems with them. It's the odd ones that might have a couple of investment properties or they don't really care about the properties as much as others do, and they don't want to do any work around them. And you know what most agents do when we get landlords like that?
Don't work with them?
We ask them to leave. Yeah, we ask the landlord to leave. And right. I think that's your better bet. If you were creating a bond, you're creating a bond for all of the landlords for only a minority of the problems that occur.
Right. So this is going to want some owners, some landlords to contribute to an administered fund that would hold a body of cash, let's say $500 or $1,000 per tenancy agreement, to make sure that if any repairs need be done, that there's the wherewith to do it.
Yeah. I think that most landlords, that in my experience, if I'm managing their property and I have a working relationship with them and I say, hey, look, this needs to be done, they'll do it. I really think that this is, again, another problem that would create an administrative nightmare, and it would take money away from people who are investors that need every cent they can get also. It's not just a tenant issue. I know some landlords are just really horrible with the way they won't do things. And interesting enough, there should be, more, rather than a bond, there should be a small government department, very small, in Canberra, so they can keep buying there, Kayley, that you can complain to, because you can complain to the Department of Fair Trading, but then they've got to go back to the agent, and it does this loop, and you're back where you started with most investors.
There's a lot of renters out there. A third of the population rents now.
That's correct.
Ooh,
yeah.
Interesting here from Mortgage Choice as well. An annual investor survey shows 40% of property investors in New South Wales and Victoria want to keep their investment property for at least 10 years, with those in New South Wales intending to hold on for longer. Is that still generally the minimum you would advise people to hang on to an investment property before they considered selling it?
Kayley, I'm not a seller of property. I advise most people when they talk to me, which flies in the face of what I do for a living, because you want people to sell. But you also want people more than selling. You want them to do well out of property, because then they're encouraged to buy more down the track, or they make sure that their family and friends get involved. I believe you keep property for a lifetime if you can. I don't subscribe to selling property at all. So 10 years to me is a very, very minimal amount of time to keep a property.
Okay. I guess in some situations, if people, if relationships break down, the properties
story.
all have to be divided up, don't they?
I think so. And right now, for example, when I was referring back to my daughter purchasing property 10 years ago, she purchased at the top of the boom, and it's only just been this last boom that she's done well out of it. So if she was to sell 3 or 4 years ago, she would have undersold herself. She would have stayed in there for 7 years, and then she would have missed the boat. So I think 10 years is a definite minimum. And
I guess in the first few years, she probably had very good returns on her investment.
Very good, good returns, nice easy rental return, and again, because she's had the property for so long, and she fixed part of a loan, which is what I've told both the children: fix part, leave part variable, so you can pay some of it down if you want to, but the fixed is there, and I don't recommend a fixed loan for 100% of property, but I do recommend a portion of it fixed, so that you've got some sort of concept of what it's going to cost you.
Can you think of any good reason to sell a property after a short period of time?
Yes, if you have to, or if you found something better, or if your lifestyle has changed, absolutely, most definitely. I've known some people to sell their property at a loss because there was a property that the family owned and they had a chance to buy, and it was what they wanted. So it really is a personal thing.
Okay.
I just really try to encourage people to stay in there for as long as they can, Kayley, because at the end of the day, when I go back to the first property I bought for $23,500 in the wonderful suburb of Punchbowl, which in those days was a long way away from the city of Sydney, and today the properties there are selling for 1.2 to 1.6.
Do you still have that property?
I don't, because that's how I bought my first business. There you go. Now so there's a reason why you might sell. Because I opened my first real estate office, or bought my first real estate office when I was only 21 and a half or 22 or something, and lived by the philosophy that anything is possible when you don't know what the hell you're doing. And so, because if I knew what I was doing, I'd have took myself out of it. So.
13 12 83. Charles Tarbey's here tonight taking your calls on Property Fast Track. Just before we get on to a look at the market wrap, just want to ask you your opinion on this. It would seem to me, for whatever reason, that folks, this is a generalisation, people who own commercial property don't seem to look after it as well, generally, as those who own residential ones. Have you struck that?
Well, I have more commercial than residential for myself personally. And yes, you're probably right, because unlike a normal home that might require ongoing maintenance, with commercial property, a lot of times you've got tenants moving in and out, and they might do fit outs on properties. So the properties can look pretty good most of the time with commercial. Okay. And so you're not having to invest as much. But yeah, it's one of those things. Commercial isn't that pretty. Okay. Nick, it's not like a nice house.
That's good. I can sleep easy now. Charles Tarbey's here tonight, 13 12 83. Dolly's called in from Ashfield in New South Wales. She wants to talk about the landlord bond.
Oh, gosh, okay. There you go, Dolly.
Hi, guys. How are you all?
Good, thank you.
Okay. I got a question because you were talking about this landlord bond trust or whatever it is. This is a little bit concerning to me because... as a landlord, if we are going to contribute towards that, I'm a good landlord anyhow, just wanted to find out that it's going to actually disadvantage the renters actually, because obviously it's going to increase their rent as well. Is that correct, Charles?
Yeah, Dolly, I agree with you. Any fees that are placed on people, you know how when a bank, the government's placed fees on banks, well, the banks will find a way to pass it on. And I think it's the same with anything. If you're burdened with more cost as a landlord, whether your interest rates move up or whether something such as this is introduced, you're going to have to do something about it. And I think you're absolutely right. But Dolly, like you said, you're a good landlord, and the majority of landlords, and I'm talking about the greater majority of landlords that I've dealt with over the years, are concerned about their properties enough to look after them. It's just the minority that generally cause the majority of problems.
Thank you, Dolly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dolly.
Thank you for your call. Just like Dolly, she's going into the draw to win $1,000. It's $1,000 a day.
Oh,
just for giving us a call, 13
this
12
new?
83. Yep.
Yes, I'll get my Amy, give us a call quickly so that we can put you in for $1,000.
You're
I'm
listening.
sorry, Charles.
Oh,
no, you
I can't
are
do it?
disqualified.
Oh,
Yes, you are.
You're listening to Property Fast
What a
Track.
bugger.
There are some great advantages in being the world's largest real estate company. For a start, your Century 21 local office uses the best technology and knowledge base in the world. Combined with the fact that each office is independently owned and operated, your local Century 21 agent knows your city, your suburb, your town and your street. It also means Century 21 agents can offer a huge range of resources and experience, including information from over 300 offices around the country. It's no surprise Century 21 is the fastest growing real estate brand in Australia. Buying, selling or looking for a new home to rent, contact your local Century 21 office and find out why they really are smarter, bolder, faster. Visit century21.com.au. Charles Tarbey, Kayley Harris and Nick Bennett here tonight. 13 12 83 is our number.
Now, selling your house is a competitive game these days. With so much information available at people's fingertips, you not only have to wow potential buyers. When they walk in the door, you've got to catch their attention online first. A key way of doing that is with styling, making your home look beautiful, sometimes with rented furniture. And with the spring market just around the corner, it's a great time to get the thoughts of an expert. Tahlee Accad is the Brisbane Client Relationship Manager with Furnish and Finish Property Styling, and she joins us tonight. Hi, Tahlee.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Hey, Tahlee, apart from putting the coffee on, what's the first thing we should do to style our house for sale?
Absolutely. Look, if the property is still occupied, I do always recommend to try and declutter and depersonalise the space. By doing that, you'll allow potential buyers to basically walk through the property and gain appreciation from the home without having somebody else's belongings throughout. I do also always recommend a fresh coat of paint. It certainly does wonders if required, and it will freshen the room and the home ready for sale.
Good stuff. Good advice. The personal photos around the place always make me feel a bit out of place.
Yeah, you feel like you're looking into people's personal business, don't you?
And people are nosy. They will walk through and they'll sort of see who lives there, and they really want to be able to see themselves in the space. So by depersonalising it, you are definitely targeting a much broader market.
It can't be as bad, Tahlee, as Andrew here in the studio, who did go to an open for inspection and found snakes in a cage in a room. It was either the agent was very poor at what they were doing, or the property was rented and the tenants wanted to make sure that people didn't go into the house. So,
that was a deal breaker.
I must say we've certainly come across a few interesting ones along the way.
What are those, Tahlee? Tell us about those interesting ones along the way.
Look, it's really important to be able to try and capture a broad market. So you need to try and make it as easy on the eye as possible for potential buyers going through. And if you've got a very eclectic look, or if you've got, plenty of personal belongings, or, snakes in cages that can be perhaps quite confronting for potential buyers, they just cannot envisage themselves in the space, and that's also in terms of the layout as well. You need to make sure that the home has that real easy transition from one room to the next to ensure you are targeting a broad market.
So Tahlee, when you engaged with people, what do you do when they hire you? What's the first few things that you might do to get started on it?
Absolutely. So all the quotes we offer are obligation-free, and Furnish and Finish services all of Sydney, Brisbane, the Sunshine Coast and the Gold Coast. And the quotes are tailored to suit the property, the target market and the budget that they've got to work with as well. I'll also always advise the client, if they are using any existing pieces within the property, what the best placement for those pieces are and how to basically work with the space.
Do you consider how to get smells out of places, for example, Tahlee? Because I think that we learnt not so long ago that of the 5 senses we have, the nose detects things immediately and turns people off or on.
Absolutely. And look, if you do have a little bit of a stale smell throughout, I do always recommend to make sure that you have your windows and your doors open at least for an hour before any open homes. We also do always put a beautiful soy and lime, the homemade scented candle within each home that you can burn during the opens, and they send a lovely fragrant smell throughout the home as well. And if the vendors are still living in the property, if they wanted to perhaps pop a couple of not too obtrusive smells throughout in terms of candles or incense, as you don't want to try and detract any buyers, but just to have a lovely fresh scent throughout the home, and make sure the linen and things like that on the beds are clean as well, as that will deter buyers if you've got pieces throughout that aren't clean.
So, Tahlee, if you go into a house and the people's furniture just is dreadful,
sucks the big one.
How do you? How do you have that conversation with them and say, look, this is really, this is dreadful. We need to put some more contemporary furniture or something in there.
Absolutely. And look, you will come across vendors that are very emotionally attached to their homes and to their pieces. And we do come across them all the time. It's just a matter of educating them about the property, the market, and what the target market is. Not all vendors will understand that the target market for their home may not necessarily be someone perhaps of their age, or interested in the same sort of style. So for us coming through as professional interior designers and stylists, we will create a new look and feel for the home. So we basically need the vendors to be able to understand that we know what we're doing, we understand the market.
So Tahlee, do you think it's ever a good idea to sell a home empty?
Look, generally only 10% of people can actually envisage a room unfurnished as opposed to furnished. So basically you have about 3 seconds to make that first impression.
Wow.
What we do is we'll take that guessing work out for buyers completely by presenting the rooms in their best possible light.
Well, Tahlee, you're one of the most important people in a real estate transaction for me, because at the end of the day, you can tell the sellers all of the things that I can't. And that way my relationship with them still remains strong.
Tahlee Accad,
right.
Thanks for your time. She's the Brisbane Client Relationship Manager with Furnish and Finish Property Styling. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining us tonight. 13 12 83. Charles Tarbey's here talking property fast track, and you can get a hold of him on that number or email. Click feedback at talkinglifestyle.com.au. I reckon the smell thing's really interesting. I love the coffee pot being on, and maybe some fresh bread in the oven.
Well, they say put a cake in the oven because it...
Put a bun in the oven.
So, Charles, here's a...
Oh, my God.
Say that.
He's terrible, isn't he?
I remember looking at a house.
Yeah.
I like your thoughts on this. I remember looking at a house when I was married.
When you were married.
When I was married,
Yes,
married. And I walked into this house. It was a big 2-story place. And I instantly walked in there and went cold.
Why?
And there was something in the house.
Something in the house? Was it a poltergeist?
And it might have been. I felt. I felt like I'm not one of those.
It's really quite bizarre, because the number of homes I've been into over the many years I've been in real estate, you're absolutely right. Some homes you walk into and you can feel whether it's a bad home or bad family home or something has happened.
Yeah, it wasn't a positive feeling.
In the house,
and I remember saying to the husband at the time, look, it's a lovely house. It ticks a lot of boxes. It's incredible. But if I was here on my own at night and you were at work, I would be petrified.
Well, there have been deaths and suicides and all sorts of things in houses nowadays that has to be declared. In the past,
yeah,
it
that's
never
right.
had to be.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And declared up front by the estate agent as a part of the campaign? You're not going to advertise it on a billboard, but you've got to declare it?
There was that situation of the house...
There was a house at West Ryde where that young man killed his parents.
That's correct.
Yeah,
and
remember that.
And it wasn't advertised as it went to the market. It wasn't promoted that way, and the real estate agent copped a lot of flack over it. And I think it's really difficult. How do you say it? And sometimes you don't even know. You don't even know if somebody passed away in the house.
Gee, that's a tough one to handle, isn't it?
But if whatever you know, you have to declare. Full stop. So does the seller. And if they don't, the seller, if the purchaser finds out, they have a very strong case from being.
It was
able to
sad because it was such an amazing property, and I just couldn't do it.
Or it could work for you. You could say, when Bono was out here touring with U2 in 2005, they rented the house, and some U2 fans would go nuts and pay more for it.
That's exactly right.
That could work in your favour.
The John Lennon house where he wrote the song Imagine.
Oh, really?
Palm Beach. Yes, that was a big feature of the advertisement, was that John Lennon wrote the song Imagine at that house in Palm Beach.
In Palm Beach, New South Wales,
Correct.
or Queensland?
Correct.
Did he?
New South Wales.
Is that right?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes,
That's
didn't
something
know
you don't
that.
hear every day.
Gee, and you know your music is
Well,
Charles.
for a muso like you should.
Well, I'm not a muso. I only hang around them, which is why I like you, because you're a muso.
Which is weird.
Charles Tarbey's here tonight. 13 12 83. Around the grounds we go soon. We'll have a look at the real estate scene in Clarinda in southeastern Melbourne and also in Wynnum in eastern Brisbane in just a moment. Have you say to win a K if you speak to Charles Tarbey tonight, or Kayley or myself? You're in the draw for $1,000 with the Brekkie Show tomorrow. John and Gary will draw that. 13 12 83. As we go around the grounds, thanks to Century 21's extensive national network of real estate agents, it's always good to get a snapshot of a special particular region. And tonight, we're joined by Alex Vouladas from Century 21 Clarinda in southeast Melbourne. Hello, Alex. How you doing?
You say that very well.
Vouladas. You know, I grew up with some Greek people.
You too, Tony. Good afternoon. Good evening.
Hello, Alex. I grew up living next door to Con Babianotis.
Sorry, what's that?
I grew up living next door to Con Babianotis.
How are you, Nick?
Good, thank you, Alex. So tell us about your area. Where exactly are you, and what's unique about Clarinda?
Sure. Clarinda is a suburb positioned 19 kilometres southeast of Melbourne CBD. It's a fairly elite small little suburb. It comprises of approximately 7,466 residents, and it's probably a suburb approximately 4 square kilometres as well. And it falls under the postcode of 3169.
So it's pretty high density, isn't it? I'm just guessing. It seems like a lot of folks in a 4 square kilometre area.
Yeah, the population is roughly about 7,466, according to the data that we've got, and it does lie 4 square kilometres.
And Alex, what's the most exciting thing about Clarinda other than your good self?
Honestly, I still think it probably offers great value for money. Positioned where we are, only being 19 k's southeast of the CBD and close to major shopping centres. We've got Chatston Shopping Centre, Southland Shopping Centre, virtually 10 to 15 minutes drive. We're bordering suburbs such as Oakley, East Bentley and Clayton, where now the entry point is north of $1 million. So with Clarinda, it's still quite affordable for a first-time buyer to get something at an entry point level around the mid to high $700,000 mark.
All right, so you can get in there for 7.
Probably top over 7, probably in the mid 7s, where we're set at the moment. Yeah, probably mid to high, you'll definitely will find something.
Yep.
As we go north of 800, once again, you're looking at those second tier 3-bedroom brick veneers with the ensuite and fairly updated as well.
And have you been a part of all this good Melbourne growth?
I've been in Clarinda for the last 17 years, yes.
Yeah, Alex is one of the leading real estate practitioners across the country, so he knows his area very well, and and a lot of people go back to him because of his history in that area. So you were there when houses were selling for $150,000, weren't you, Alex?
Absolutely. When I first started, we were selling houses at $120,000, and that would have been your entry point area back in 2001. That same property now, as is, expect to pay around that $750 mark.
Gee. And what sorts of people are now living there, Alex? I guess, given that you've got a great history in the suburb, who's now there that was, not there perhaps 20, 30 years ago?
It's quite a multicultural suburb. Our existing, what I call our clienteles, and communities range from our clients from India, Greece, Cambodia, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, and of course Australians as well.
Interesting stuff. And what do you think the outlook is like for 2017? What's your growth forecast for Clarinda? Even Clarinda.
I think definitely room for improvement. Once again, we're getting a lot of clients coming from the surrounding suburbs of East Bentley and Oakley and South Oakley, and every open we do ask the question, where our clients come from, and they're spilling in from the surrounding suburbs. So is there growth? In my opinion, yes, there is. There is growth.
All right, Alex, thank you so much.
Alex, thanks very much for your time.
Alex Vouladas there from Clarinda in Victoria. And next up to Nina Adams from Century 21 at Wynnum in eastern Brisbane. I'm so excited, Nina. I was born there.
Really? Good evening.
How are you? And I grew up in Bushing Street, Wynnum West.
I know it well.
There you go, top of the street. And a young Kayley used to skip up to the Wynnum West State School, top of Wynnum Road.
Yes.
and run back down the hill again afterwards.
See,
Loved
that's
it.
great, isn't it? Now, Nina, that's one of those examples we were speaking before. If you knew something like that, that could well increase the value of a property. If you could sell the home that Kayley Harris once lived in, I mean, imagine what they could do for the campaign.
Exactly, yes. I'll have to do a bit of research there.
They'll go, Kayley who? I think my parents bought it. It was some special government program. We're trying to get young people into homes, and I think they paid $3,500 for it in 1963.
Wow.
We were there for 10 years before we moved to Melbourne. So what's it like in Wynnum now?
Well, you wouldn't recognise Wynnum now. It's certainly starting to change with units in the main shopping area springing up all around. A lot of homes are being renovated all throughout the suburbs. From Wynnum, Manly, Lota, new homes are being built, so there's a lot of subdivision happening. Brand new homes on smaller blocks, on larger blocks, and we do have some acreage as well, so it's very much a mixed bag.
A lot of the homes, I remember growing up as a kid, were on stilts.
Yes.
And they've been filled in.
Homes.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say we used to get underneath the house in the dirt and play with our, matchbox cars and build little cities and stuff. But I noticed when I've been back there, a lot of those homes now have all been filled in and they've put, like another layer of living underneath.
Yes, well, they've all been raised to legal height because very few of them ever were. So people are doubling their living space.
Yeah.
Right.
It's very, very much worth it because the blocks of land are usually generous that they're sitting on, and that's the valuable part.
So is it still an issue, though? Is that in a flood zone?
No, we have very little flood zone area, in fact. The only suburb that may be flood affected slightly would be Hemmett, which is more towards the industrial area, but Wynnum itself is, and Manly and even Lota is very much flood-free.
Okay, stock and prices. Let's go for homes first. Houses, what would we need to pay there in Wynnum?
Well, the medium house price is probably mid-500s at the moment. But in saying that, we sold a house at auction just on Saturday. It was a little cottage, 85 years old, on a main road, but that went for $350,000.
See,
almost unheard of now.
Nina, it's Charles. I think those prices are very understated. Given what's happening north and south of Brisbane with pricing, I think they're exceptional prices, and a lot of times people don't know that those areas exist.
I think we have been undiscovered for quite a while, but now we are certainly seeing the drift. With open houses, you're seeing a lot more people from other suburbs of Brisbane coming to us and buying because it is very affordable and a great area.
And what's a unit worth?
The median price for units is probably $370.
And we used to go down to the bay down at Manly, and there was the Forbes Carlisle Swimming Centre, and Forbes Carlisle taught a lot of Aussie kids to swim, including me, down at a pool down there.
Good stuff.
It's still there.
Is it still there?
Yes,
Really?
the Manly pool's still there.
Wow. Wowee.
And they
What
taught
a
you
buzz.
well because you float and you're still here
I
yourself.
float for a whole different reason.
That's great. Well, Nina Adams, just before you go, Nina, I'm just keen to know, because I hear a lot about Manly in recent times. Have you got some super duper public transport now in Wynnum? Has something happened there with the train or not?
Well, the train has always been here.
Yeah.
I think it's just... I don't think there's anything special happening
Okay.
with the train.
But you've got public transport into the CBD of Brisbane?
Yes, very quickly too. It's about a 25-minute hop on the train from Manly and you're right in the CBD.
Well, that's a great thing, isn't it? Ticks all the
It
boxes.
is. That's right.
All right. Well, thanks for your time. Nina Adams from
Nina,
C21
thank you.
Wynnum,
Thank you very much, Nina.
Eastern Brisbane. So you reckon it's a good buying up there, Charles?
Yeah, well, look, you're seeing a lot of the pricing
Yeah.
coming in southeast Queensland and north of Brisbane, and that's starting to come into that price range in the mid fours to mid fives. And Wynnum is a very, very well established area, and it's gotten even more established. It's not far from the water.
Yeah.
I mean, it's right on the water, if you like. You would have experienced that.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yep.
So from my perspective, and again, it's one of those things we always talk about. You always hear about certain suburbs and it's the certain suburbs in between that you should be paying more attention to.
Yes.
So, exceptional buy.
Coming up, we're going to speak to Tom Panos about some weekend auction clearances on Talking Lifestyle.
Another weekend has come and gone. The gavel's been brought down and buyers and vendors across the country are popping corks in celebration. Let's catch up with Tom Panos. He's an auctioneer and a 2-decade veteran of the business. Tom knows what's going on. That's why he's on Property Fast Track now and later tonight Sky News with Charles Tarbey. Welcome, Tom.
Good evening, my friends. How are you?
Well, thanks, mate. Good to have you on board.
I was going to say good evening and name each one of you, and I thought I'd just say friends because we're all friends at the moment. Life is good. Another strong auction results across the main areas.
Yeah.
So and there was one. Look, there was one 3 or 4 doors from my house that ended up selling for $350,000 over reserve. So
Wow.
they had the champagne. They had the champagne out.
Well, see, that demonstrates what we were speaking before, Tom. We're talking about, if people in Brisbane, for example, knew that Kayley Harris had lived in a home that does good things for the sale price. Obviously, the folks who live next door to you know that Tom Panos lived nearby, and hence there was a $350K over the reserve price.
That's the way it is now. So, Tom, isn't it funny how the market's still there? There's not as many people out there. There are not as many people coming through open for inspections. The bidders aren't acting furiously in many cases, but the clearance in Sydney still over 70%.
Yeah, absolutely, Charles. It's staggering. And as I left the property, one of the buyers came up to me. He said, Tom, we'd sat down, we'd put our plan together, we had a strategy, and we got knocked out straight away. I said, you're like what Mike Tyson said. Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
So true. Now, moving in Melbourne, the clearance rate pulled back slightly from previous weeks to 73.7% from 560 reported auctions. It's still pretty strong, right?
Yeah, Kaylee, it's very strong. I spent the whole week in Melbourne, and I spent it in all parts. I went to areas that Charles has got offices. I went to areas where the independents have got offices, so I got a good broad view of the marketplace from $8 million to 800,000. And Melbourne, I have to say, and I said it last week, Charles was talking about Melbourne, migration happening there, all the things in the marketplace indicating that there's always going to be, long-term strength. Melbourne, to me now, is a clear region of Australia that is got the strongest. Any listings they get, they just sell them. Agents will do anything.
Now, Tom, I was right about Melbourne. I may not have been right about John Lennon and his song Imagine, but more importantly, Melbourne market for me has come of age, and it's a classic city on its own. The economy is stronger. There's a lot of reasons to migrate there. The prices are still quite exceptional. Why wouldn't you buy there? And if you look at the growth year on year, topping Sydney.
Yeah. Look, Sydney is interesting, Charles, because I'm having a look at the sub-market breakdown of Sydney, and whilst there are certain parts of Sydney that are around, 80%, there are various parts of Sydney that have dropped down. I'm looking at Sutherland at 55%. I'm looking at some of the southwest areas of Sydney at 54%. So I think what we are seeing also in Sydney is that markets are beginning to actually build their own mini clearance rate. And I was talking to an agent that does a lot of blocks of units, and he said to me that blocks of units in areas now that are densely populated with lots of approvals of other units being built, he is struggling to get buyers on them. But in other parts of Sydney, he reckons that he's got 30 buyers on each one of them. So we're seeing that regions now are beginning to get their own character and their own dynamics.
Tom, would it be fair to say that if Sydney was so hot, a lot of people then sort of moved on to Melbourne, the Melbourne market's heating up, and eventually when it exhausts itself, where do people go from there? Are they going to go to Tassie, or are they going to go to Adelaide or Brizzy? Where do you think it'll go from there?
Well, Kaylee, Tassie's cold. Mm-hmm. Tassie's cold.
Yep.
So you'd have to feel comfortable living there. I would say, like Brisbane at the moment's got a clearance rate, I think, hovering under 50%. You still get really good value. So if you actually turn around and have a look, across Australia, you'd turn around and say, after Sydney and Melbourne, you'd say Brisbane. Adelaide would be another area. Employment would drive a lot of the decisions that people would move in terms of location.
Yeah.
I think the reality is Perth is. I mean, a lot of people will tell you that Perth would be a difficult place to migrate because of the time zone differences, the travel time. So I would probably say Brisbane and then Adelaide.
Okay, interesting.
And, of course, we've got the regions too. So if you're committed to a particular state, if you like being a Queenslander or living from New South Wales or whatever, or Victoria, you may want to consider some of those regions outside the cap cities.
Yeah, Wollongong, the Hunter, like the Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, Geelong. So there's lots of regional parts to Australia where, like in Geelong, you can buy a property for $500,000, and you get Avalon Airport with Jetstar. You can get into Tullamarine Airport. So you've got areas like that. But I mean, even areas like Mornington Peninsula. I was there this week as well. They've got a clearance rate now of 80%. They've got prices, well over $1 million. So there's less and less options for people.
Okay. Tom, we've got a lot of stats to talk about. We'll talk about them later at Sky because there's some still exceptional results. Thanks very much, Tom.
Thank you so much.
Next week, Tom Panos, who's with Charles Tarbey tonight on Sky News as they pass each other in the corridors past hair and makeup. Thanks, guys. And we'll talk to you next week, Charles. Thank you, Kaylee. You're back tomorrow with the Daily Drive from 5.
Yep. See you at 5 tomorrow.
Beautiful. If you're still driving home, we'll check the traffic for you soon.